When a series goes on for 25 years, you don't go through time making every single correct decision. You are naturally going to get a few things wrong along the way, and that's to be expected. Sometimes it can be born out of complete ignorance or misunderstanding, sometimes out of missed opportunity, and sometimes by not realising how serious a situation is. But on occasion, a decision is made with no logical sense, or against every single narrative that's been built up to that point. So it's time to look back on some bad decisions made in Pokemon. And the first we're going to cover covers the anime. But before we do that, let's look back at Pokemon's origins. The success of the series was not down to just a video game franchise. It had both a thriving merchandise market that's still evident today, a card game, and most importantly, a successful and loved anime series. When brought over to the West, it had a catchy theme song and a young main character who captured the essence of a young kid just beginning out. As time has gone on, the opinion of Ash has generally soured, with many hoping for a new main character or being frustrated at the development over recent years. But going back right to the start, Ash was an effective main character. He had a love for Pokemon, but definitely had a poor awareness. There was a clear need to develop to be successful, and this would have helped capture the audience. You gotta remember, Pokemon's gone on for 25 years, but when it first started, the fans would have generally been young kids. I know now there's older fans and younger fans, but at the time it started, a young one would not know much about the series, and having a character that kind of represented that was perfect. Now, in lead up to the bad decision that's going to be discussed, we need to go through Ash's character arc, which goes through multiple different loops and turns in order to get to that. So let's go back to right to the beginning, discuss every league that leads up to it. So the first Pokemon series starts with Ash oversleeping and getting a Pokemon that wasn't originally intended. Throughout the first season, it's very evident Ash's inexperience and inability to be successful. He wins some badges by not even battling, struggles a lot, and it accumulates with the end of the very first league he competes in. The first league is very much all over the place. At the end of the Indigo League, Ash is actually defeated by a character named Richter, who also has a Pikachu. Ash runs into a few unfortunate situations, including tired Pokemon, one being put to sleep and then automatically losing, and then having his Charizard deciding not to bother and therefore losing. It is very much a learning curve for Ash in the first season. Granted, it's important to remember that the anime acts differently than the games, but the first season definitely highlights Ash's inexperience. When he moves on to the Johto League, which, yes, is technically the main one, he does win the Orange Islands, but there's not a league conference, so I'm not going to cover it, but he does win something at least. Gonna throw out a random sports reference there, but it's basically like winning the Community Shield when you want to win the Premier League. Yes, I'm British. The Johto League features a bit more of a developed Ash. He defeats Gary in this tournament, finally beating the main rival from the first episode. And this does, by the way, end his time as the main rival. But it's done to highlight how Ash has developed as the series has gone on. From his inexperience in the first season, in the second season, he's finally beaten his main rival. I say season, I mean league. The unfortunate thing for Ash is that he runs into his first cheat code of the series. He ends up facing Harrison, who has a Blaziken. That's a Generation 3 Pokemon in Generation 2. And unfortunately loses. I will point out Blaziken's fire fighting and Charizard's fire flying, but again, the anime works a lot differently. And at this point, I want to drive across the point of advertisement and look into the future. Media franchises are always going to be looking at the next step or the future of the series. In having Blaziken appear and win, it's a good example. It was a very good advertisement for the next generation of games and the next season of anime. Think about like an end credits for a Marvel film. You see a bigger, badder villain and you think, oh wow, that's going to be interesting to see. Can it be irritating for people watching? Of course it can, but it makes sense business-wise. Ash wasn't ready to win at this point, so preparing for the future was a good idea. When Ash went to the Hoenn League, he developed a lot but ran into a major problem. When facing Tyson, he did not have a fully evolved team. His Corphish and Grovyle hadn't fully evolved at that point. Granted, his Corphish never did, but his Grovyle eventually did, and lost while his Pikachu was defeated by Tyson's Meowth. And think of this like a mirror image situation. Just like Ash, Tyson hadn't evolved his main partner into his final evolution, but the difference was having a fully stronger team. Ash had a Grovyle, while Tyson had a Sceptile. Tyson also had things like a Metagross, and this is once again a learning curve for Ash. It wasn't an egregious loss per se. Ash didn't have everyone fully evolved, and I think Team Rocket's Meowth also warned Tyson about Pikachu. I think overall at this point, Ash had started to learn his problems. Tyson was just a little bit further ahead than him, and that's kind of what makes the Sinnoh League the first insult of the series. We were now on to Generation 4, and the Sinnoh League was an indication of the failures that were going to come later on. Ash's development was pretty clear by this point. He defeated his regional rival Paul, using Paul's previous Chimchar that's now an Infernape, using the Blaze ability. There was some decent strategy involved, and he went into the semi-final of this region's tournament with a very strong team. He'd actually been rotating out some of his previous Pokemon, including a Sceptile coming in, and then he ended up facing Tobias. And what was wrong with Tobias, you ask? Well, he started with a Darkrai, who was a mythical Pokemon. At this point, Darkrai had not lost any battle and took down half of Ash's team. But Sceptile was the one that finally took it down. But he had 5 Pokemon left, and the next one that he introduced was a Latios, who defeated the rest of Ash's team, albeit getting knocked out by Pikachu in the process. And he never revealed his other 4 Pokemon. So this is a major issue in the series. This pretty much felt like they had been backed into a corner in writing and didn't want to give Ash his title win just yet. And the only way to counteract the team that Ash had at that moment in time was to write in an overpowered character into the story, and then that character would stop Ash's charge to the title. Tobias went on to win the title, not losing a single Pokemon, with the exception of the 2 that Ash knocked out in their fight. For most, including myself, this kind of felt like a cheap defeat. It truly felt like Ash was never going to win the big one at this point. He developed a lot, had a strong team, learned from his problems, but due to cheap writing, had to get something overpowered in there to stop him winning. But it did mean if Ash did win, it would make it all the more worth it. As we went on to the Black and White series and the Unova League, it definitely felt like a step down in the character's development. First and foremost, Ash lost to a new trainer with his Pikachu, and by this point Pikachu should smack all base level Pokemon. And no, any reason they give does not make any sense. And yes, I get it, I'm a grown adult complaining about this, but you know, even as a kid's story, let's have some cohesion. As he went through to the Pokemon League, he was defeated by his friend Cameron, who had not only brought 5 Pokemon to the battle accidentally instead of 6, but had his first stage Riolu knock out Ash's Unpheasant despite a type advantage and a stronger Pokemon. His Hydreigon wiped out most of Ash's team. Oh, and Ash didn't evolve most of his Pokemon, leaving them in lower stages, and Cameron's Riolu evolved mid-battle and knocked Pikachu out for the win, with 5 Pokemon. Now, by this point, the anime has started to lose a lot of viewers, especially after dub changes, poor losses, and decisions made that didn't make any sense. The dumbing down of the character after Gen 4 left a lot of frustration. Ash stood on the precipice of victory, only being beaten by some quick, overpowered character writing in order to get through. But let's look at this from a different angle. You could say yes, this year is a hangover from the previous. He got so close the year before and fell the next. This is a very common thing in sports sometimes. A team gets so close and fails, and then falls the next year from the cushion defeat in the previous. A lot of competition is mentality. Sometimes a bad loss can affect you in the next tournament, and I definitely think that's what Black and White is. Ash had picked himself up for the Kalos region. He once again had a very strong team and had learned from his mistakes. They were fully evolved and had gone all the way to the final. In the final, he was going to face Alain, or is it Alain? Alain, someone who had already beaten him twice in the series so far. And you might wonder what's important about that. Well, Pokemon has a notorious history of having Ash lose against a gym leader or trainer only to come back stronger and beat them. This has happened multiple times throughout the series, even so much so in this very one with one of the gym leaders. Not just that, Ash hadn't lost much. His team featured Greninja, which is by far one of the strongest Pokemon he'd ever had, which also had an exclusive Ash Greninja form that made it even more powerful. Heck, it beat a Mega Sceptile with quad resistance with a water attack. It was pretty strong. And I do remember promotional material around this time that also talked about how strong Ash's team was. Ash had even made a promise to a trainer that he was going to win, and the trainer walked away as if he'd made the right choice to trust him. There were flashbacks to previous tournaments about how much he has developed, and guess what? It was the 20th year anniversary of Pokemon. Everything was there. It was as if all the stars had aligned. The story even got people paying attention who hadn't watched it for years. And I was one of those people. Ash had stumbled, gotten better, gotten close, taken a step back, but now everything was in place for him to win. Not only were all those factors in place, but the battle was a little bit in his favour as well. He had his Ash Greninja, which is Water Dark, versus a Mega Charizard X. A Fire Dragon versus a Water Dark. Don't forget the Ash Greninja knocked out a Mega Sceptile that had a quad resistance. It was there. It was perfect. It was almost like an accumulation of everything. So yeah, he lost. So earlier on I pointed out about looking to the future, and also about Pokemon's target age. But the simple fact of the matter is, there was never going to be a better time to pull the trigger in the anime on Ash winning. And somehow a decision was made to not have him win. For whatever reasons, rumours of a decision being made near the end for him to lose, maybe to extend the anime even longer. The anime also quickly goes into a story about Team Flare, which would have cut the celebration short, but I don't really think that's a reason. Now a few years later, Ash does go on to win the Alola League. But the problem with that is that by this point, nobody cared. Everything had a line for Ash to win in Kalos. Old fans like myself came back to peer their head in. Those who kept watching were excited to see it, and naturally the newer younger audience were watching anyways. And it all just completely flatlined. Never again in the anime would there have been a better opportunity, and they blew it. The decision to not have Ash win is a good retrospect on capitalizing on momentum when you can. Naturally in today's world with a shared universe like Marvel or ever-growing franchises, we are always looking to the future. It's how do we build the next step? How do we look at getting more money in the future? But sometimes it's important in media to live in the now. Worry about the future later and go with what's right now. I'm going to use a sporting analogy to highlight this. Yes, I do have many interests. Let's say you're an NBA team. You have a really good team, but the stars have aligned and that superstar player is available for a trade to get you over the top. But you have to give up quite a few picks and it might mortgage your future to win now. Do you do it? Of course you do. You take the shot on the now and don't worry about what's to come in the future. Sometimes things make too much sense and you just have to go with what's right. When you build up to something for so long, there simply has to be a good payoff. The likelihood is the decision not to have Ash winning Kalos came about to prolong his crowning victory, or to not make you feel like he'd succeeded just yet. Not just that, Alain was not a bad person for Ash to lose to, but the problem was everything was in place in that universe for Ash to win. Not just that, it was perfect in reality as well. It was the 20th anniversary year, people were watching because everyone thought the payoff was coming, and they did simply not pull the trigger. It's important to give value to a meaningful moment. You can't let it teeter out with a whimper, and the unfortunate thing is, that's what Pokemon did with Ash's eventual victory. Thanks for watching guys, make sure to like and subscribe as it really helps me out. Comment down below if there's any bad Pokemon decisions you want me to cover in the future. See you next time guys.